Need a trusted, competent legal advisor who can solve your problems expertly with minimal fuss and at a reasonable cost? That's why we're here to help you. We provide services to clients ranging from individuals to listed companies and not-for-profit organizations. We are available to provide help regarding corporate restructuring, tax issues, drafting contracts, corporate and commercial transaction disputes, and many more. We are committed to bridging the gap between your businesses and legal advisors by providing support for critical business matters. Because our reach is like no other, and this approach increases the efficiency of your business processes while saving time and costs. Our firm runs around the clock servicing American, European, Middle Eastern, and Asian clients and time zones to serve your legal needs. A complete perspective on your commercial direction. Malcolm Tan Chambers, a leading full-service Singaporean law firm with an international reach.
The regulation has shifted over the last, every 3 months, basically, the entire crypto scene changes. So STOs were a very hot topic for the last 1.5 years. 1.5 years ago, nobody was putting any money into security token offerings. Now, a lot of people ask me, is security token offerings or STOs the next wave of ICOs? And I say no, because it's a very simple thing. You can just take out the smartphones, look up Google Trends, check out the keywords ICO, STO. You will see that STO has consistently been a very high line. Now, who are the people interested in STOs? They are family offices, private equity people, traders, high net worths, those who are already used to investing in securities, those who like to look at the regulations, and those who want to be regulated, and those who are bound to be regulated. Whereas ICOs, you can see a downward trend, right? The peak was in January 2018, and then it has been one straight line down all the way. Now there's a slight peak up again, a slight bump up again, because IEOs are popular right now. But essentially, to me, and what I see from evidence, ICOs and STOs are decoupled. They are not appealing to the same people. Now, regulations perspective,
So, Philippines, I think you have the opportunity to make the world the best tech thing or fintech in the world, because you have so many mobile phones. You have more than 7,000 islands. It's impossible for banks to have offices in 7,000 covering everywhere, but mobile phone covering everywhere. We should make Philippines a cashless society.
like the challenge. I'm going to try to raise your awareness about digitalization, and what's happening really in the world. So at global, local level.
So digital transformation is not limited to banks, but in fact touches all facets of our daily lives. There are estimates that by 2050, the Philippines will be a top 50 economy in the world.
Joining today's summit. So today I have here three lovely guests, and they are coming from the fintech and blockchain industries. So first of all, I have here Malcolm Tan from Gravitas International, and Mr. Dennis here as well. Join us. He's representing Geniusto, and plus James here from Porter Pay. Now, these guys would be sharing their insights and informations about what digital banking and what digitalization it's all about. It's more about their experiences onto this industry and what they can offer to the public or to the masses. So I believe we can start these questions, gentlemen. And I'm really excited into this topic because it's very interesting. It's about disrupting the banking through digital transformation, where does the future of fintech and digital asset and token offering will go? And what are the types of banking solutions that we can support these masses or technopreneurs or entrepreneurs into your company? I mean, what are the things that you can actually offer them as a solution? So I think that we can start first by introducing each one of you and what your company is offering. So let's start with Mr. Malcolm Tan from Gravitas International.
Hello, everyone. My name is Malcolm. I'm from Singapore, and I am a practicing lawyer. I also own several companies. So let me just give a very brief overview about what I'm doing and which are these companies. So, thank you very much for introducing me, Veronica. So, Gravitas International, I started this company, this group, about 2.5 to 3 years ago. We focus on providing ICO, STO, and IEO consulting services to clients. To date, our projects have raised over $3 billion in total on all the projects that we have been working on. Of course, we were not solely responsible for all the money raised, but we assisted our clients with all these. So what this means for entrepreneurs out there is, if you are trying to look for fundraising, usually in the seed to the A series, meaning something like $5 million to $100 million, that's where we have a sweet spot and how we are consulting with our clients. So traditionally, if you are trying to raise money in this space, you would be going to VCs, venture capital, or private equity, or going to the public markets. But the ICO, the token issuance route, is very interesting. It helps to enable new startups to raise this kind of money without having the backing or the background that is required for other forms of fundraising. So this is what got me interested in the space, because previously I was involved in fundraising in various aspects. But when I found out about digital assets back in 2017, I basically dropped all the other things that I was doing and focused purely on to this industry. So at Gravitas International, we provide end-to-end service, basically advisory services, incorporation and structuring, business, which is the business proposal writing, tokenomics, and white paper writing. And the fourth thing is marketing and distribution, basically socials, community management, distribution, investor roadshows, and fundraising. And the fifth thing we do is the technology, which is we help clients to mint their coins, do the smart contracts, tokenize and digitize their businesses. So at the end of all this, after raising the money, we help the clients to onboard onto exchanges where the public can then buy and sell their tokens. And we also help the clients with the market making and liquidity provision. So basically an end-to-end service provision for anyone who wants to digitize and tokenize their business. To me, this is a huge industry. I think digital assets is going to be the fifth asset class that will join the current real estate, equities, commodities, and cash and equivalents. And I believe that this will be developing into a $10 to $100 trillion industry within the next 10 to 20 years. Right now, the market capitalization of all the cryptocurrencies is only about 260 billion. So I think that there's a huge room to grow. I think we are only at the 1 or 2% mark of this industry. So huge potential. Second main entity that I have in this space is my law firm in Singapore. It's called Malcolm Tan Chambers, LLC. No surprise there, since my name is Malcolm. And we have a practice that's focused on fintech, and we're helping a lot of clients to register their companies in Singapore and to go for licensing in Singapore. I mean, Singapore is one of the top 3 financial centers in the world, and it's a gateway between East and West. With Hong Kong's situation right now, Singapore has taken the lead in Asia, and it's a gateway country. There's a lot of money. There are trillions of dollars in Singapore looking for good projects to fund. So having the space regulated right now through the new Payment Services Act in Singapore is helping clients to look for institutional money. And institutional and enterprise money is much bigger than retail money, as we are all aware, right? So this is something very exciting that we at my law practice is doing right now. We are right now focusing on the Payment Services Act licensing for a lot of companies who are looking to onboard in Singapore. So if you're interested in doing that as well, feel free to reach out to me. And I do have a whole slew of other projects, but I'll cover that in a later conversation. What I'd like to mention quickly would be my entity called CrypTech. Crypt Technologies is a holding company for various companies in the fintech space. And one of this is a project where we are applying for a full digital bank license from Singapore, and we're acquiring a few banks around the world as well. Another entity that I'd like to mention is Exxon, where we are looking at growing a community in the co-working space through a community token. So if you're interested in any of these, feel free to reach out to me and we'll share more details. Over to you, Veronica. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Malcolm. I really appreciate all of this introduction. So that was a very interesting story. I mean, as well as all of your companies that you have been working on. I believe that later on we can share more insights about it, and you can share tips and advice as well to our viewers. So thank you so much for that. Now next, let's move on to Mr. Dennis Peña, the Director for Special Projects for Geniusto Philippines. So kindly please send show us some introduction about yourself and the company you're representing today.
Hi, thanks, Veronica. And My name is Dennis Peña. I'm the director for special projects of Geniusto Philippines Incorporated. Geniusto is a multinational company. We're based in Australia, in Asia, or Asia is obviously in the Philippines, and in Europe. We're a fintech company that provides platforms and ecosystems for financial institutions, banks to insurance companies. We provide also consultancy services. I think what's unique about our company, one, a lot of IT companies or software companies out here in the Philippines are really targeting the big banks, the big financial institutions, because where the money is. We are dedicated in working with the smaller banks, the smaller financial institutions that provide the grassroots financing to the underbanked. But it goes without saying that we're also working with big banks and commercial banks here. Aside from that, we provide consulting services to these financial institutions, and we offer like digital transformation programs because the core of our business is how can we digitally transform these traditional financial institutions and in part their customers. My journey in digital transformation and digitalization started way back in should I say early 2000s, where I was working with an international NGO, and we were trying to modernize or digitize microfinance institutions across Asia and South America. Currently, we have projects with several financial institutions, and I'm glad that we're having this conversation because we believe that digitalization is one of the avenues, if I may use the word, or tools to achieve true financial inclusion for the underbanked, most especially here.
Wow, that's a really interesting journey that you shared today, and thank you so much for sharing it to our viewers. Now, I believe that Geniusto I met Shane Herman, so I believe he's the founder of Geniusto, and
Yes.
he will be joining us as well on the later part of the week, and he will be telling us more about what Geniusto can offer. And thank you for representing Geniusto today, and I believe later more of the viewers, they will be able to learn more about the company, and then feel free to send the right questions on our chat here. So feel free to chat, and then later there will be some staff from Genius or anybody from the team can also send a reply while we're doing this conversation. So next, let's move on to James. So James is the co-founder of PorterPays. James is coming from Malta today to give us more insights about the global concierge service for payments. So James, can you share us more information? How did you get started and about the PorterPays project of yours?
Thank you, Veronica, for being here. I'm James Camilleri, co-founder of PorterPays. So PorterPays is a fintech company, and we actually created PorterPays out of a couple of pain points that we as entrepreneurs experienced ourselves. So if you look at SMEs, SMEs, they are the backbone of the economy, right? Whether in Europe here, whether in Asia particularly, and they are the backbones of the economy, but at the same time, they are actually underserved by banks, right, in various ways. So, and besides that, also SMEs, they also differ from one to another. So when there's an SME, and especially in this digital age where you want to actually go to the market very fast, right? And the time and the speed to market is essential. There is a gap, there's a limitation, because there are a lot of financial institutions, there are a lot of banks, there are a lot of other payment service providers that can offer you or can help you to actually go online very quickly. But at the same time, you actually need to focus on them and not on your core product so that you can actually build up this your digital product. So that means that there's a gap, and this is what PorterPays are actually doing. We offer an end-to-end payments platform. So essentially, we work with SME, where we help them to focus on their core business, right, on what they are actually trying to do. And we handle the complexities of payments and banking ourselves. So essentially, we are a platform where anyone an SME that would like to build their digital finance platform, whether to actually serve certain industry or not, we can actually do that. So we work with a number of banks, we work with a number of financial institutions also, and we're connected globally. So even when these SMEs, they want actually to expand outside of their region, we can seamlessly help them to actually do that. And we don't just offer payments. So I mean, we actually go beyond that, right? So we actually offer other solutions, like, for example, working capital, for example, right? So you want to expand and you want to raise funds, for example, you can actually also do that through our platform. So we offer an end-to-end service whereby we help SMEs to actually focus on their core business, and we offer them a seamless, frictionless integration when it comes to payments.
Oh, that's very interesting, especially here in the Philippines. There are so many SMEs, merchants, and entrepreneurs who are looking as well to start to raise some capital or like an additional funding for their businesses. I believe that is also a really good business model, and everywhere around the world, most entrepreneurs are trying to find this type of solutions as well. And putting it on a digital, on the world, and it's more for the digitalization, that's very interesting, and that could provide them more accessibility to the Filipinos. And James, were you planning as well to do this business in the Philippines?
Exactly. So we are actually working with a number of partners in the Philippines, and we are actually in the process of, in the initial stages to enter the Philippines. We understand that, as you mentioned very well, Veronica, the market is actually being underserved, and SMEs are actually facing challenges when it comes to getting working capital, whether they want to actually do cross-border payments also inter-Asia. For example, they're actually incurring high fees. So we actually want to actually help these SMEs by offering them a platform, a central location where they can actually go and they can actually have their own finance needs served, right? In a very frictionless way.
That's very nice. I mean, thank you for sharing all of that. So let me start with you now about being a startup in fintech. What are the challenges that you had faced before as a startup company?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we faced the same challenges that any startup, face. So when it comes to funding, in particular, for example, when it comes to fintech, one of the main challenges I would say is regulation, right? So we operate at a global footprint. That means that we also need to deal with different regulations. And since we offer the same platform, across the board, we want to make sure that the mechanics that is operating that platform across different regulation works perfectly. So we're at the moment operating in Europe. We're also expanding, as you said, in Asia. In Asia, for example, one of the main challenges is that different regions have different regulations. Now, if you look at Manila, Philippines, or if you look at Singapore, Vietnam, they all have different regulations, right? So I would say if I have to pinpoint, one challenge is actually regulation, right? So that is something which is a challenge, which, I'm happy to say that, our amazing team has actually overcome that. And that's why, but we understand that SMEs is a challenge for them and for any other fintech.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, James. You are right about the regulations. And I think Malcolm can back that up since he's more connected towards to the regulation side. So he can share more about his challenges as well as the startup. And maybe you can share a little bit more about the regulations in Southeast Asia too.
Okay. Thanks, Veronica. So regulatory is always a challenge for everyone, right? So government's job is to protect the people, and entrepreneurs and startups are always ahead of the curve. Technology is always ahead of the curve. So always there are interesting new technologies and interesting innovative ways of funding that the authorities and the regulators have to chase after to figure out and then to come up with compliance and laws. So let me describe a bit about the previous phases and where we are at right now as I view it. Previously, the internet is only about 20 plus years old, but right now it's ubiquitous. Everyone is using it. Everyone has a mobile phone. Some people have 3 mobile phones, right? So we have moved from totally non-digital and non-connected to totally connected and mobile. So nobody really saw this happening over the course of the last 20 years, but this has given rise to many different phases of growth, many new technologies, and many new regulations and compliance requirements. So if you look back at the 1990s, basically hardly anyone was on the internet. But that started to change. Today, the tech giants are all internet giants. Then after the internet, of course, so that caused a bubble to rise in terms of the funding space in the 2000 to 2002 years. And then after that, cloud computing came about. So actually ERP came about first. So SAP, Oracle came up, they rose, and a whole slew of other ERP systems came up. Then after that, there was cloud, there was CRMs, customer relationship management systems. Then these are all different phases, again, in terms of technology growth. And each of them brought new challenges. Each of them brought new technologies to the forefront and more entrepreneurs and startups who were looking at getting funding in this space. But the next big financial innovation, so to speak, was actually crowdfunding. So crowdfunding got popular around the 2010 space. And when that happened, a lot of banks thought they were going to lose their business and everyone was going to get crowdfunded and socially funded. But that didn't really take off, although Kickstarter and Indiegogo did very well in the reward space, and then there were a few localized crowdfunding sites. But more as governments came to know more about crowdfunding, the regulators kicked in and said, laws that cover crowdfunding would be the same as the securities laws. So a lot of countries then regulated this space, and crowdfunding got clamped down on. The next big rise in interest on a retail level came about when cryptocurrencies came to the forefront. So Bitcoin was born in 2008 after the Lehman Brothers disaster and the global financial crisis. And out of that, cryptocurrency was born. And cryptocurrency became extremely popular in 2017 and early 2018, where there was a huge run-up in terms of the market capitalization. And that's what really brought me into the digital space, into the digital asset space. And with the advent of blockchain technologies and cryptocurrencies, I see that there is a big disruption in the VC space, in the investing space. And now entrepreneurs can take advantage of issuance of their own tokens in order to raise funds. And with the advent of blockchain technologies, there's a new, unique legal structure which never occurred before. Basically, the DAO, the autonomous organizations, right? Decentralized and distributed. So there is no CEO. Like Bitcoin has no CEO, right? Nobody that is telling them what to do. It is just a giant software that anyone can plug in as a node and use, right? So the current legal environment is very interesting in this space. And over the last 2 decades, I've never seen a new technology or industry come about that is as interesting as cryptocurrencies and digital assets, because every single country has a different way of viewing it. I've never met an industry before where every government has a different treatment of cryptocurrency and digital assets. So that's very, very unique. And that has given rise to jurisdiction shopping. So basically, if you're a startup entrepreneur and you're looking for funding or you're looking at setting up your startup somewhere, now is a unique time in history where in this space, you can actually go to any country which is the best suited for you, for your business model, and structure your company and organization there. And in fact, some entrepreneurs are so entrepreneurial that they don't even structure a company. They just create a DAO, right? And get everybody to join in, and suddenly you have all the members and they're all organized in like a corporate structure, but with no boss, right? So that's a very, very interesting space. So to me, regulations are always catching up, right? So what I'll just devote a bit of time to describe is what I mentioned earlier, right? Singapore now has the Payment Services Act, which is now regulating the space. So those of you who have been following digital assets and cryptocurrencies over the last 2 to 3 years, you will note that this is a very fast-paced industry. Basically, every 3 months is a totally new situation. So I've seen this over the last 6 to 8 cycles, and the world is changing rapidly in terms of digital asset space. Right now, we're in the space where governments are coming to grasp with digital currencies. And in fact, so many governments in the face of the COVID situation are now considering issuing their own central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. So in essence, what this means is that physical money will eventually be phased out from Earth, right? Most governments will go into digital assets because it's much easier to control. If you have seen some YouTube videos or some TV segments, or if you've been to China, for example, you'll notice that hardly anyone carries a wallet now. Everyone just takes a mobile phone, and everywhere they can make payments, right? I think this is something that is catching up in India as well, and in some parts of Southeast Asia. So physical cash is disappearing, and digital assets are on the rise and will be a new asset class. And so I think Singapore is well poised to take advantage of this growing trend. And the New Payment Services Act, of course, it's legislation, so it's going to be too boring to describe it right now. I've published a few webinars about it, and happy to talk to anybody who wants to know more about it. But what I would advise is that if you are a startup and you have some significant seed money, somewhere like $500,000 to $2 million, it might be worthwhile to get regulated and registered in Singapore, because then with the regulation, with the status of being regulated, it's much easier for you to raise big money, right? So it's much easier to go to institutions.
But thank you for sharing that, Malcolm. I really appreciate all of this. Very informative. It's so thick information that you've given us today. I believe the viewers and the audiences would have some few questions to you, and they can write these questions again on the chat box. If you have some questions, feel free to ask anytime, and Malcolm and his team would be more than willing and happy to write or answer to your questions. So you mentioned more about the Southeast Asian Payment Service Act and banking solutions regulations, and I believe it in Philippines, especially like the BSP, have certain regulations as well when it comes to the ICO, STO, and Dennis here would be able to share us more insights about Philippines when it comes to the regulatory, what are the updates on the BSP, and what does the Geniusto is doing right now when it comes to the fintech and financial services. So Dennis, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Veronica, and thank you, Malcolm, for this wonderful insight and sharing that you gave. But like what Malcolm said, and I think what James said earlier, the interesting thing about Asia and the whole world is each central bank has its own different set of regulations. I think for Singapore, in my opinion, they're more open to using cryptocurrency as a currency, whereas here in the Philippines, the BSP is taking prudent steps. In fact, was an article, I think back in late 2019, or I think early this year, that there's a growing concern of cryptocurrency movement, or use in the Philippines, is probably being used to fund terrorist activities. So in that sense, what I can see is, from my personal point of view and my opinion, while the Philippine government, especially the BSP, is not saying no to cryptocurrency, but they're taking more prudent, more careful and prudent stand to understand it. Let's take away from the BSP for a second and go to the average Filipino. Now, the average Filipino that we have, there's just recently, most of the Filipinos discovered the beauty of digital banking. So for a lot of Filipinos, it's an infancy. In fact, there's a report that ever since the COVID lockdown, there was a huge spike in uptake in digital banking, meaning, oh, we can do this. We didn't know that. So leading to that, I mean, going to cryptocurrency, since the Filipinos, a lot of Filipinos are just opening up to digital banking. I think their take on cryptocurrency is going to take a bit more time, because they are careful and would study first their options. Now, if you go to the provinces here in the Philippines, most especially the third or fourth class municipalities here in the Philippines, banking to a lot of Filipinos, especially to the micro and small entrepreneurs and their families, is really a personal and family affair. They still would want to go to a bank. They still would want to sort of feel of them, oh, I graduated from being the underbank to actually being able to go to a bank. So for them, it's kind of a social emotional experience, because so you look at it, so banking is practically social. So we at Geniusto, we're taking steps to sort of introduce how the social emotional banking platform that really encompasses the Filipinos and their communities. Now, just going back to regulations, the Philippines has been opening up its regulatory framework for digital. We have the InstaPay and the PesoNet, which I think most of the viewers that we have here in the Philippines now know. They're also working on several policies, like there's now a national QR code standard where Filipinos can do QR code settlement with QR code, and there's agency banking. Agency banking is sort of like a bank can appoint an agent to do basic banking for them. The agent might be, I don't know, a sari store or some MSME. What's good about it is that it gives municipalities or townships in the Philippines where there's really no bank the capability or the ability to have a bank. So that's one of a number of things that are going on. And I'm sure in the months to come, BSP being a forward-looking central bank would come up with a number of regulations that would support digital banking and ensure that in supporting of digital banking, digital transformation of the Filipinos would push forward. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you for all of these clear insights, Dennis. So that's very interesting that Philippines is already moving towards to that space when it comes to the digitalizations and regulations. And I believe our audience later would know more and would want to know more about this information, especially it can help the SMEs, technopreneurs, entrepreneurs, or all those other businesses who would want to transition into the digital space. So I do have some few questions as well that regarding about like when did you guys decided to jump on to this industry, because this is a fast-paced industry, and how did you decided to start moving your business into digital space? So maybe you can start now with Dennis and then we can share a little bit more of that.
Well, I used to start in Australia some years back as a fintech company. And they've been doing business in and out of the Philippines since 2015. In fact, Geniusto had a small part to play in crafting some of the BSP regulations and national QR code and the agency banking. I got into this space really because when I was working with the Rural Bankers Research and Development Foundation, it's a research and training arm of rural banks, I saw that the industry is slowly, well, stress on slowly, embracing digitalization, and they're looking towards the fintechs as enablers for their industry. So that's why I got into this space. But prior to that, many years ago, like I said earlier, or shared earlier, I was working with microfinance institutions across Asia, South America, and North Africa to introduce digitization. It's not yet digitalization to their space. What I call transforming them from fully manual to manumatic, 60% automatic, 40% manual. So right now, what we're trying to do with the banks, the financial institutions that are working, is that we're trying to transform them really into how can you not only further your business, but how can you enhance your customer relationship to digital, particularly through omnichannel. That's what we're trying to do.
Thank you.
Ron.
Thank you for that, Dennis. How about you, James? From banking, or is it more like you started as a banker or investment banker? So how did you start transitioning into this? Because this is a very interesting story that you can share.
Yeah, I mean, I was never a banker, Veronica. I'm an entrepreneur, but I actually I've always been lucky enough, I think, to actually work on the digital space, right? So before I was in fintech, I also worked in online gaming, also, which is also another area very interesting. But and also in e-commerce, and in what I've noticed, and I've worked in both in Europe and also in Asia, what I've noticed that yes, we've actually come along very well when it comes to digital. But at the end of the day, there's always a gap between someone that wants to do something digital, how they're going to link it up with the bank, right? So as Dennis was saying, there is this gap that still needs to be actually filled. Now, of course, banks are actually moving forward, but then it's also giving out opportunity to digital banks to actually come across, and what banks didn't do in let's say, I don't know, 50 years or 60 years, now digital banks are going to do it. And we're seeing the shift actually in the Asian market, right? Because as we're talking, like digital companies, they want something to work end to end, right? So from my side, I've always been in the digital side, and I've seen now this wave coming along, and I think also that what we are living in at the moment now, when it comes to this unprecedented times, when it comes to coronavirus, I think that this will also, when we actually go out of this will also speed up the digitalization of stuff, right? So certain things that it took ages for institutions, right? So big institutions to actually change because of bureaucracy. Now they had to do it because they had to, right? They had no option because of the virus thing. And I'm hoping that, this will actually speed up the digitalization, right? So for example, we were more based on cash, right? And I think now the idea of cashless, was mentioning, in China, they are far ahead when it comes to cashless. But I'm hoping that, other continents and will actually, even here in Europe, right? I'm hoping that, more people will actually move into the cashless society, which I think that will also speed up then people moving into digital banking, because all of a sudden, then, you don't need to actually start collecting cash. If you're starting up a business now, you're probably starting it up in a end-to-end, everything will be digital. So that means that going into, having or partner up with a digital bank actually makes sense for you, because they can actually give you a wide range of services that you would need, and you have to get up and running very, very quickly. So I think that, yes, I think the digital space have changed a lot, and I think that now is going to be disrupted even more. Especially with what we're living now at the moment.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that, James. And I believe Malcolm earlier mentioned more about his background and his history and how he started transitioning into the business side. And maybe, Malcolm, you can share a little bit more background on what are the impact as well. Like, this is a question that is always being asked to me. So what are the impact of these regulations and impact onto the local businesses when it comes to adding all of these other services, for digitalization? So maybe you can give us more information about that.
The first thing is always banking, because we are all in businesses. We need to deal with money, right? So the first and most important thing is banking. I'm just reminded now about India. If you are following the space, you will note that over the last couple of months, the Supreme Court actually ruled that the Reserve Bank of India was illegally stopping customers from opening bank accounts if they are dealing with crypto. So that caused a huge wave of interest in crypto. And previously, this activity was almost dead because nobody could operate a bank account. If a bank finds out that you're dealing with cryptocurrency or digital assets, they shut you down, right? No questions asked. And if you're a business or an exchange, if you can't deal with money, you can't do business. So I would say the first answer to your question is, what's the biggest impact? I would say licensing and regulations will help you with your bank accounts. So if you're a business, you will know that, or you're a startup entrepreneur, you will know that having a bank account is critical, because without a bank account, you can't even process payments. And of course, this is where James comes in the picture. His API can help you with processing money, right? Because if you can't earn money, you can't operate a business. So the short answer, if you have a license, then your banks will welcome you. If you don't have a license, or you're in risky business and things that they are not familiar with, they will not let you open a bank account. And that will mean you are very effectively handcuffed. You can't even do your business. So that's the first thing. The second thing is big money, right? What I mentioned earlier about the enterprise money and the family office money, institutional investors, high net worths, accredited investors. So basically, if you're familiar with the term family office, this is usually second generation, third generation wealth. And the forefathers, they came up with some successful business models. They made a lot of money, and they have passed it down to their later generations. And these founders always have a mandate. A mandate means instruction or command. So if you disobey that, you're not allowed to invest. So usually this mandate means that you can only invest in things which are regulated. So this comes back to the regulation, right? If you are regulated, you have a license, then you will be able to attract institutional money, large investments, and the large investors. So without being regulated, it's very difficult to find those who are established and with deep pockets to invest in your business. They will ask you, are you compliant? Are you regulated? And then you say, no, I have no licenses. Then they walk away. But if you have a license, then that really attracts their attention. Then you can go to VCs, you can go to angel investors, private equity, you can go to large institutions, you can even go to sovereign wealth funds and look for money from them. And once you have a good lead investor, a lot of investors will come in. So startups, is very important to look into regulation if you can. That's why a lot of people are going to places like Philippines, like Singapore, and the countries where it's difficult to get licensing, like in Thailand, in Malaysia, where it's almost impossible to get a license. That means that it basically is a game over for startups, right? They can't even start their businesses there because the regulatory bar is set so high that they need too much money to get compliant and get licensed, and therefore they don't even start, or they go to other countries, like what I mentioned earlier about jurisdiction shopping. So that's the short answer to your question, Veronica, about what's the great impact about getting licensed.
Thank you so much for that, Malcolm. That is very, very interesting. And I believe now that most of the entrepreneurs, with all of these conversations and topics and information that they have given to us, it is very informative. Correct? I mean, you have here a really good set of speakers and panels. One is a lawyer, one comes from the banking industry, one provides you the solution when it comes to the digitalization. So I really think that later on the day, you will feel free to send them a message on the chat box, or try to get onto their Facebook pages, and then feel free to also ask them questions later about these other services that can help you onto your businesses. So I think James here is from Europe. So there are also some difference when it comes to regulations compared to Philippines. Maybe Dennis and James, you can tell me more about the regulations in Europe in difference with the Philippines regulations, since Malcolm already shared the regulations in Philippines. So
yes, so when it comes to Europe, to operate and to start accepting money, right, you need an e-money license. And the nice thing about Europe is that once you get the e-money license in one country, then you can operate in all of Europe, with the exception now of UK very soon because of Brexit. So when it comes to Asia, of course, as Malcolm said, every region has their own licenses. Now, the nice thing about what we are doing essentially is that we actually already have those relationships built up in place. So if there is an SME that would like to actually start transacting in Europe, for example, right, and vice versa, or there is maybe an Asian company based in Europe and want to actually do business in Asia back home, and so on and so forth, they don't need to worry about all the different complications, right? Because we actually offer, a digital platform that is actually compatible across the different continents, right? So we are doing the complexities, we are handling that to you, and for you for the business will be seamless. So when it comes to regulation, yes, there are different, in Europe, as I mentioned, there is an EMI license, which is of course very important to get to start accepting payments. And you also need to adapt to certain regulations. One of them is, for example, PSD2, when you'll be handling data. So you need to be very careful with that. So when that comes to Asia, every market has its own, regulation, which it can be a bit of apart from time consuming to actually get this get regulated, it also means a lot of investment, right? So because we're talking about money here at the end of the day, and institutions and banks, they want to make sure that you're not doing anything illegal. So that is something which is very important, right? When going into when you need to make a decision whether you want to get your own license or you need to actually work with someone who already have the license and they can provide you in plain English guidelines of what you can do and what you can do, right? So you need to actually evaluate that when need to actually expand or start making payments digitally.
Thank you for that, James. I think Dennis here as well could share a little bit on the EMI licensing in the Philippines. Would it really work when it comes to connecting the current license provider in Europe and work together with Philippines, and they also work together with Singapore Payment Service Act? Would there be any link together?
Yes. Yeah, actually, the central banks of the Europe and the Asia are proactively trying to build that channel, that bridge, because from a Philippine perspective, the number one contributor to the economy of the Philippines, not the number one, probably one of the top 5 or top 10, are remittances from OFWs. So what Filipinos want and what fintech companies want in Europe and in Asia is to provide a seamless gateway for Filipinos to send money to and from the Philippines. Now, just to sort of react to what James was saying earlier, here in the Philippines, the same. You need an EMI, an electronic EMI license to transact electronic money. I think it's the same for all countries who have banks that are digital banks or institutions that handle digital cash, if I may use the term. Now, for the Philippines, I'd just like to go back to the earlier topic of regulation. One of the barriers that we have in the Philippines is for people to open a bank account, whether it's digital. Before, it's really the regulation that we have here, wherein the person opening the bank account has to need to have 3 valid government IDs. Sure, in cities, that's not a problem, but we have areas in the Philippines wherein there are residents that, they don't even have birth certificates, but they're needed to be included in the formal financial sphere. So how does the government address that? Well, it will be addressed through the national ID system, wherein that ID, it's similar to the Aadhaar, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly in India, where you can use that ID to open a bank account. You don't need 3 or more, 4, 5, or 10 IDs to open a bank account. And I think when it gets implemented, more and more Filipinos and are going to get included in the formal financial sphere. Now, going to the MSME, I think when that's implemented, when you open up a business, government agencies won't ask again for 2 or 3 more IDs. You need to just use that IDs. Going back to regulations, the central banks in Europe and in Asia, and particularly in the Philippines, are really cooperating with each other now. James just mentioned that, PSD2. Fintechs in the Philippines, like us, we are trying to make sure that we are PSD2 compliant and GDPR compliant, because those regulations will eventually find its way in the Philippines. And it's safe to say the regulatory agencies are looking into that, if not, are slowly implementing those types of regulation, albeit modified to fit the Philippine context. So that's it. Thank you, Veronica.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Dennis. And yes, it is a huge, huge problem when it comes here in the Philippines with a number of unbanked in the Philippines. It's quite huge, and people are still not really familiar. I mean, it's more like they know that they need to open a bank account, but they're having a hard time on opening the bank account because some of the problems here, let me share you some of those problems or challenges, is getting the ID. So some of the Filipinos
Exactly.
have birth certificate on the legendary records, and to get those records, it will take you years to dig into those paper files and to dig into all these files. And some of the other older adults, they don't really have an ID. Students cannot even get a national ID without getting another set of ID, proving themselves or to the KYC. So KYC is always a huge challenge when it comes to acquiring a bank account. So would there be any type of solution that you have in the space or you have in mind when it comes to solving this KYC? Because I believe Geniusto is kind of working onto this ecosystem where it connects through multiple sets of industries like education, health, all of these other industries, right?
Yeah, but one of the things that we're doing for KYC is sort of proof of life KYC. Well, I can't divulge the technology that we're using. It's more. I wouldn't say it's beyond biometric. It's biometric plus. There's the KYC doing when we onboard a customer, or if for example, a financial institution gets the platform from us, we one of the KYC methods that we're using is proof of life, meaning when the customer onboards for the first time, there are mechanisms to ensure that's an actual living person. And at the same time, when the customer logs in at each and every time, so that any avenue of fraud would be eliminated or really narrowed. Because at the end of the day, we're all after security. And I think just to add to the conversation, I think what the hesitation of a lot of Filipinos, I don't know if it's in other countries, in sort of entering the digital banking space is security, because there are a lot of stories of hackers. There's a lot of stories intrusion. That when big banks get hacked, it's big news, and it's because there's a lack of I won't say total education, but proper education on the beauty of digital banking. There's still hesitation in Filipinos. But during this COVID pandemic, a lot of Filipinos had to trust digital banking, had to trust, they said, wait, contactless banking is safe. Cashless banking is possible. That's what I said earlier. If you study the trend over the past couple of weeks, over the past couple of months, there's a huge spike in Filipinos going contactless or cashless. Even one of the leading digital banks here in the Philippines said they had a huge spike in uptake in electronic digital banking enrollment in UCT KYC.
It's very nice concept. I mean, you are correct when it comes to the proof of life. I mean, that's a really interesting ecosystem that you guys are building here together. And I think Malcolm here can share a little bit more on the security side. Malcolm had handled some different projects when it comes to securities, right? Maybe you can give us a little bit of advice when it comes to securing their KYC identity, and how can we relate blockchain now into this industries in banking?
Okay, so let me comment on a few things. It's quite interesting to hear from Dennis regarding KYC, and to hear your question regarding identity and KYC. What I'd like to raise is, again, the case of India. I think that was super impressive. A few years ago, within 1 year, India basically got its 1.3 billion people thumb printed, right? So everyone is KYC. Just use your thumb. Very, very simple, right? Everybody has a mobile or 2 or 3. So they use biometrics, and basically everyone in India got KYC. So I think if an underdeveloped country like India can do this for 1.3 billion people, any country can do it, right? It's just whether the government is strong enough to implement something like that. But seriously, that was a very, very impressive piece of work from Modi's government. And that was just on the right after they basically abolished all big notes, right? So all small notes, I can't remember. So within 1 year, they eliminated money and they eliminated the lack of KYC and managed to get everybody into the system. So I think KYC definitely can be done. Now, coming to the direct question from you, Veronica, regarding security. There are many security providers, and with more and more things going digital and going online, online security is more and more important. Earlier, we discussed digital assets and cryptocurrencies, and a huge problem with the industry is the lack of good systems, because any startup basically comes out and says, oh, I'm a blockchain, I'm a cryptocurrency company, and then a lot of unsecured exchanges, wallets, platforms get onto the market, and then people put their Bitcoin, put their Ethereum there, and then it disappears the next day, right? So why is that? First of all, there's too little governance, and this is coming back to what I was saying about licensing and regulations earlier. So if there is no good due diligence done on the systems, audits done, penetration tests and security tests are done on the systems, and they already go out there and raise money, you know, the consumers or investors who put their money there in the insecure systems should not be they shouldn't be making too much noise or complaints, right? They made the choice themselves. So that's why you could always look at getting into regulated and licensed entities. Now, having said that, hackers are a problem, but even more so than hackers are the lack of proper process. So what I mean by this is that a lot of startups actually buy white label software. They actually go out there and then choose whatever is the cheapest. Now, whatever is the cheapest, firstly, could be totally useless, right? Or very unsafe. Or even worse, the developers actually give it to you free because they want to get the big money after that. They know they are running a business on exchanges, and they have a backdoor, meaning that they have put some lines of code in there which they can automatically trigger and hack and get into your money. So that's how a lot of unsafe, unsecure systems actually get hacked. Not because the hackers are so brilliant and so able to get into the system, but basically because you let them in, right? You basically gave the thief a key to your door, so that's how they get in. That's the single greatest problem for security. So I think security is not too difficult, right? You just need to have proper layers. You can have two-factor authentication. You could use PKI, public key infrastructure. You could have your public key, private keys, and keep your private keys. Never give out your private keys, and basically secure your system. Have multiple levels of authorizations. So the more convenient you make your system, the more open you are to attack. And that's unfortunately a balance that everyone needs to balance, right? If you're an entrepreneur, you need to make it such that you keep your customers, but at the same time, you keep your customers safe. So the simple answer is really do your own due diligence. And if you're an entrepreneur, you're a startup, do look out for the security systems out there, because the moment you are successful and there's money in your system, then there will always be hackers or attacks on your system. And daily attacks happen all the time. I remember one quite funny but quite sad incident as well. I was in Malaysia meeting with a business associate, and he's a successful exchange operator. This was like one and a half years ago, and I was having dinner with him. So we arranged to meet up for dinner, and then his team, his GM and the founder came. We started having drinks, but he had a very worried look on his face. And then he kept going out. We were seated there in a group and having drinks and chatting, and he kept going out with a very worried look. So I followed him out of the restaurant. I asked him, "What's up?" He said, "My LinkedIn profile is talking to my LinkedIn profile." So I asked him, "What does that mean?" He told me his phone, the same identity, same face, same everything, same name, is talking to him, asking him to pay something like ransom, right? Like 20 Bitcoin or 100 Bitcoin or something. Otherwise, he'll hack all his systems. So of course he said no because the guy was asking for too much, and he really lost all his accounts. Right, the hacker took over everything. So it took over all his wallets. Took over. I think he had like 40, 50 different bank accounts and wallets that got hacked. He had to spend the next, I think, 10 to 12 hours in the police station and going through things. And basically everything was in a mess. And the guy that hacked it was actually one of his employees. So he let his employee get into the central system, and then somehow they got his ID. From his ID, they hacked into his phone, and from there they hacked everything. Right? So it's not a brilliant hacker, but he managed to get in because the door was open. Basically, he was already in. So that's a big problem with security. Yeah, but that's something we should all look out for.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Malcolm. So now, as a technopreneur and entrepreneur, you understand what are the things that we needed when it comes to our businesses. How are we going to protect ourselves when it comes to the digital stage? Because right now they're still kind of worrying what are the securities they can get when it comes to their businesses. How are they going to start moving into this type of phase? And plus, I know that during the COVID situation, you were right about that, Dennis. The growth of the users who wanted to look for solutions for their businesses, it's quite getting bigger now, and they're more interested, especially on the digital banking. I think that, when it comes to James' company as well, who can also provide these services for the SMEs, and that could also be very helpful to this type of online businesses, online resellers to connect to your companies together. And then maybe later you can form on a good collaboration or partnerships together where you can provide these solutions to these entrepreneurs, where on our side here, what we're doing is more to help them, to educate them what are the processes that they needed, so we can actually provide them the support and teach them as well the process of going through the current transition. So we're going to be helping you as the entrepreneur to transition into the digitalization. So thank you so much, guys, for sharing that insight. So any tips and advice that you can share now to our users? So I believe you have shared so much tips already over the call, and I have covered all of the questions that I honestly have. Let's start with James when it comes to connecting to your business. So maybe you can share this small tips on how do you start the process on going from traditional business going now to the digital business side.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think when you actually move into digital, you need to actually do your homework really well. And first and foremost, you need to understand, okay, who is your target audience, right? Because the digital is so big, right? There are so many people using the internet. So you need to narrow down, okay, my solution that I'm going to actually provide is going to actually solve certain pain points, but to whom, right? To whom is going to be, and so you need to segment a bit. And after you segment that, you need to understand, okay, how you are, if you're talking about payments, right? How are they going to actually interact with you, right? What are the medium that they're actually at the moment using? Are they using, for example, WeChat Pay? Are they using something else to actually transfer the money, right? So one of my tips is do your research really well, right? So this is really important because that will also make or break you when it comes to digital. Then when it comes to suppliers, right? Choosing the best supplier, once you actually know the target audience, then you can actually be wise, can choose your supplier, what your clients actually need. And that's where what we were discussing before, right? So you need to make sure that you choose a supplier that offer you, the best security, of course, when it comes to digital. Right? There's an element of trust. You need to trust that particular company. Look at what clients they have on board, right? What they can offer you. And the other thing when it comes also to look into the digitalization, a lot of people actually plug in a solution to start off with, but then they don't look beyond what will happen once this actually be successful online, right? Do I need to change supplier, for example? And that is actually really crucial question to us, right? Is the supplier going to help me to actually grow and scale, even internationally, right? Because once you grow, once you have your suppliers inbound to your system, to change those relationships is going to be very difficult for you, and it's going to cost you a lot of money later on. So you need to make sure that the suppliers that you're actually on board can help you will help you not just in the beginning, but also along the way. So I would say do your research very well. Make sure that you ask the right questions to suppliers. Make sure that you get to know them. You can see what is their vision. That's your vision, matches yours. If yes, I think that will be a good partnership. So yeah, that's my tips.
Thank you so much for sharing that, James. And you are right. There would be certain steps that, as an entrepreneur, you need to go through all of these steps and processes by knowing what do you really want. That's one part. That's the first step that is also a good advice. Second step is, yes, you are right when it comes to conducting your due diligence and study what are the processes and what is necessary to the businesses, like what Malcolm had been mentioning on throughout the call, which is the regulations. You need to comply to all of the banking regulations to make sure that you are securing your business and you're offering a better solutions to the Filipinos. Wherein, as Dennis mentioned as well, some of the other tips earlier, when they need to go through the process of an entrepreneur, they need to also go through central bank, BSPs, and check for what are the regulations that they also needed. Correct, Dennis? So
not only to the BSP, let's say we're working now with traditional banks that are moving into digital. If you look at the digital banking or banking industry in the Philippines, it's the traditional banks really have the early mover advantage because they're okay. Yes. And what we're saying to traditional banks, but this applies to traditional businesses, micro, small to big, who are moving into the digital space. I think one of the tips that I can provide is you need to map out, like what James is saying, do your homework. And in your homework, you need to really map out your customer value journey. What's the customer value journey of your customer line from end to end? Especially the customer value. There are two types of customer value journeys. What's the journey they're having with your business right now, traditional? What journey would you like them to have as you go to digital? Now, the public or the strangers, where your business is not visible to them yet. What journey would they have, or would you like them to have in your company? I think it's a very important part. Then, like what the gentleman was saying earlier, you need to study up on your regulations, not only with the BSP. The BSP is really for financial institutions, but if you're a micro entrepreneur in the Philippines, there's a Department of Trade and Industry, the Security and Exchange and Commission, and if you're going into services like insurance, there's Insurance Commission. So again, do your homework. And these regulatory bodies talk to each other in terms of digitalizing the whole financial industry in the Philippines. Now, the other thing is like what these gentlemen are saying earlier, choose your vendor and choose your partner wisely. Because that's really critical. I mean, there are a lot of companies out there, like what Malcolm was saying, they offer you things for free, but things that are for free are not necessarily really good. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you need to pay a bit of a premium to really get the service that your customer needs. And it only can be done through homework, really. Don't just, my advice is really to the digital entrepreneurs venturing it the first time. Just because it's free, don't really jump into it. Like somebody gives you free candy and you eat it, It might have arsenic in it. You don't know. I'm sorry. I'm just saying. You know what I'm saying? So just do your I'm reinforcing what Jim's saying earlier. Really do your homework, and it's in some form follow what Andy Grove was saying of Intel. Only the paranoid survive. To survive in a digitally powered economy where everybody is serious and everybody's competitive, you need to be paranoid for the survival of your business, your brand. That's it.
Thank you for that, Dennis. I really appreciate all of this important information that you guys have given us. And then how about you, Malcolm? And last advice that you can give to small entrepreneurs, medium entrepreneurs, even to larger enterprise?
Right, going digital is definitely the main thing right now. Is, as you can see from the COVID situation around the world, everybody is basically cooped up at home, and safe distancing measures are being implemented almost everywhere. And the only thing that is really flourishing right now is digital. So a lot of banks not doing well, but challenger banks, digital banks are doing well. Digital is basically the only thing that is really going well right now. So my advice is also this: if you are doing a traditional business and offline, you can only have a catchment area of who you can reach and who you can touch. But if you go online, then you have basically the world at your feet, right? You can reach out to everyone through a digital format. So if you are an entrepreneur, I would strongly advise having a digital presence. Have your website, because that's what everyone looks for right now, your profile. And then PR, if you are engaging a good digital marketer, good PR agency for digital, you can have a presence as strong as any MNC out there who spends millions of dollars on the same thing, right? So digital is really what I think will drive the economies around the world. And I think we are also moving into a gig-based economy. A gig-based meaning that more and more freelancers. In the Philippines, of course, there are a lot of people who are operating as freelancers, and business process outsourcing is one of the top IT outsourcing and BPO outsourcing places on earth, right? So with a gig economy, and if you look at the US statistics, every week they are filing like millions of unemployment claims. I think 40% loss of jobs. And out of these, I think 1/3 of them are gone forever, right? So more and more people around the world have to rely on a gig-based, freelance-based, skills-based economy. And the only way you can really reach out to a good catchment area is online. So you have to market yourself online. You have to market your services and your products online. And you have to build your supply chain. And you have to go digital, right? And digital means not just your peso-based economy, but also a dollar-based economy or a euro-based economy, and different payment methods that will be enabled if you are operating with correct payment gateways and payment processes. So all these things are things that you can look out for, right? So my advice is this: go digital, and that's the way you can reach out to a bigger audience.
Thank you for sharing that, Malcolm. So you were right about first step. First is before you start going into the digital space, is that you set up your digital presence by creating your own social media pages and as well as websites. So let me share you some information, or like on my experience before when I started switching to the digital transformation. So I started back in 2013, and I used to work with other companies like call center agencies, and then I started working into sales, like selling cars in Singapore, helping as well the employer in Singapore, because I used to work there before. And then afterwards, I started moving on to the digital space when I got involved into this company in Bangkok, where we market companies through SEO, websites, social medias, increasing their traffic, and so on. And I saw that there's a huge gap between traditional businesses to the digital side. Now, we started more by introducing to them how to create a website. But since that 2013, not every companies can afford to pay for the websites too, because it's very expensive. I started building my own small business here in Manila, where I help these entrepreneurs. First is to set up their social media pages. So you are right about setting up a digital presence is very important. And Facebook, to be honest, Facebook is a really, really good tool. You can maximize the use of Facebook because here in the Philippines, we have 86% of the population are actually using Facebook, and they're very active in social media. So if you want to get involved into the digital space, you can start first. Facebook is free. Start advertising your business by creating social media pages, and then later on you can get enough fundings to support for your website. So you move on. Next is to creating your website and start adding all of these other payment solutions that can be offered, that are offered by different companies, providers, not just with James' company, not just with Dennis' company, not just with Malcolm's company. So most of them, they can also offer you that solution on the later on. And yeah, thank you guys for sharing all of this information. And I really, really appreciate how, you know, like this is a juicy topic for the tech entrepreneurs who really wanted to move on to the digital space. So my last question is that I wanted to know more. So let's just have a little bit fun topic. When you hear about Bitcoin, because this is a topic, like they say, would it be disruptive when it comes to the banking and Bitcoin? You know, like Bitcoin is, there's so many news about Bitcoin and banking, and maybe, you know, you can give us what can you say about it on your experience, Dennis, on Bitcoin and banking? So when people do talk to you about Bitcoin and banking.
First, in my experience, when I was working with the World Bankers Association in the Philippines, and right now in the space where I'm in, you really, if I may be honest, the discussion of Bitcoin or cryptocurrency for that matter rarely comes into play, because they're still trying to grasp a currency that's not in the digital space and it's not in paper. So there's interest, I would say that, but there's also some sort of skepticism and concern, because they still don't understand what cryptocurrency is, and you know, in the age where, you know, smart contracts are now being the norm, really, if you look here in the Philippines, I think the application for smart contracts really start not really from banking, but from the insurance industry for filing claims. So for crypto, Bitcoin, the discussion for the I think that's just my opinion, region, especially for the small banks, are not yet that big.
Okay, thank you for that. How about you, Malcolm, for Bitcoin? What are the things that you can say?
I don't think Bitcoin is going to replace banks, although the original concept of Bitcoin was to replace the central bank systems, because the inventors were upset with the Lehman Brothers collapse and the financial collapse. So they were saying that if there is a currency that is used for payments by the population, and there is no central bank controlling monetary policy, then there's no corruption there, and this cannot fail, right? But the problem as we see it today, 10 years after, more than 10 years after Bitcoin came up, is that people don't want to spend Bitcoin, right? If you have Bitcoin, you think it's an investment product and it will keep going up. So Bitcoin is much more like gold, like digital gold. So gold is not going to be close to replacing banks, right? So I think other aspects or other types of cryptocurrency are a much bigger challenge to banks. Stable coins. When Libra, the Libra project was announced by Facebook, then all the central banks in the world panicked, really, really panicked. So I think MAS immediately made an appointment to them, and the Chinese Central Committee closed their doors, I think, for 5 days, and they had never done that before, right? Only when Facebook said they're going to come out with Libra, then everyone panicked. So when there is a big enough organization that can reach out to billions of people and say, look, use me as your payments method, okay, then people will sit up. governments will sit up and banks will sit up. So I think the last two big projects that have tried to do this are Ripple, but I think Ripple is dying off already. The banks are not really using that as their method of clearing. And the other project was Libra, right? But Libra ran into regulatory problems. So there will eventually be a standard or a model that will be used by everybody. Right now, the closest I can see is Tether, but Tether is not regulated and is not very stable. So a lot of people are using USDT. Why USDT? Because the petrodollar, the US dollar, is the de facto method of transacting around the world. So people are comfortable with the idea, the notion of the US dollar as a store of value, as the unit of currency. So they are comfortable with using a USD to transact. And USDT is not regulated by the Federal Reserve, and therefore, because it's giving a more or less one-to-one peg with the USD, so people are using that. So to answer your question, Veronica, I don't see Bitcoin replacing banks anytime soon, but other types of cryptocurrency definitely will get into play very, very soon. Like I mentioned very early in this session, CBDC, central bank digital currencies, are right on the doorstep, right? Within the next year, we will see China roll that out. In fact, some people are saying that by November this year, they will roll it out. Once the Chinese yuan is digital, then the world will change, right? The world as we know it will really, really change, because right now the world is being ruled by the US dollar, right? When the digital yuan comes out, then the world will undergo a huge change. So when that happens, then we will see whether the banks will collapse or whether there will be a massive change. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for sharing that, Malcolm. So you're right about the stable coins and stable assets. Later on the following week, there would be a presenter. They will be presenting what are the stable coins and how can it really help out when it comes to the remittances side. But James, anything that you can add on to this questions?
Yeah, I agree with Mike that Bitcoin will not be replacing banks, and I see this also from the space where I'm coming from. I mean, most of the challenges is that how you can actually move that money or convert money from Bitcoin to actually moving into banks, and that's where banks get a bit suspicious, and they reject certain ideas there. So I think that Bitcoin is good, to serve certain needs, but I think that yes, it will not replace banks. I think there will be more involvement of the digital currencies, and it is also interesting, to see what will happen with the digital yen and how also banks actually harness that into their system. So I think that would be more of an interest at the moment to see what will happen, because yes, I agree. I see Bitcoin more as an asset where you can actually buy and reinvest and make money from, rather than actually using it on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you for adding to that, James, and thank you guys for clarifying the common questions of the Filipinos about what is Bitcoin is for. Is it really going to disrupt the bank? Is it really a tool for that? So I mean, I really appreciate all of this juicy topic and conversation with you gentlemen, and thank you so much for taking your time to share your insights and advice to all the Filipinos. And then later on, guys, feel free to send them a message. I will be putting on their website, their links onto this chat box. So feel free to visit their website. So Malcolm's site is gravidas.international. Dennis is for geniusto.com, and James for www.porterpace.com. So feel free to visit their website, Facebook pages, and reach out to our speakers. And Malcolm, would you like to share a little bit of gift, maybe? I believe you're writing a book about ICO, STO, and that's your second release, right?
Right. I wrote a book on how to ICO/ITO in Singapore. You can look for it. It's on Amazon or Kindle. And I did a second edition. So the first edition was in October 2017. And if you look at, fast forward to the last chapter, I think all my predictions were correct. So that was good. May 2019 was the second edition that we published. And the reason for that is because, like I said, the space changed so much. Every 3 months, it's basically a totally different industry, right? And also because the Payment Services Act was passed in January 2019, and it came into effect January 2020. So in May 2019, I published the second edition because we were describing how the Payment Services Act would change the Singapore scene.
Thank you for that, Malcolm. If ever you would want to give a reward to our viewers later, so we can click on some rewards or registration page down below this Facebook group, and you can throw questions or anything else that you want, so you can reward our viewers with your book. I believe that book is gonna help you guys to fully understand what is ICO, STO, and digital asset token offering. And yeah, so I mean, I think this is all about it. We covered every single thing and topics, and this will really help all of these startup, new businesses, or even old businesses to start transitioning into the digital space. So once again, gentlemen, thank you for taking this time today, and thank you for sharing all of your knowledge to all the Filipinos. So please, any other last words that you want to share?
No, thank you very much for organizing this. Glad to speak with everyone. All right, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very much
for the time, and
thank you so much. And James, I know it's a morning in your time there, but thank you for taking this morning juicy topic with us. So Filipinos, are you guys ready? So if you guys are ready, let's hit on the like and share button. Feel free to keep on sharing all of this video and share it to all of your friends. And later we will be uploading all of these videos into our YouTube pages, so feel free to subscribe to that. And once again, I wanted to give a special mention to St. Louis University for providing us support onto this global virtual summit, as well as the SIRIB Center. To Ma'am Corazon, thank you for helping us on organizing this event together with all of these other speakers out here. To London Outsource and to SLU Fab Lab. And special mention as well to all of our speakers who will be speaking on the next coming week. Thank you, guys. And once again, I think to blockchain and beyond. That's what I always say. So thank you for this call, and you have a wonderful day.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
thank you. Bye-bye.